And I still screw up. I still screw up all the time. Like, I make mistakes. I say the wrong thing. I do the wrong thing. I miss something quite obvious. But the superpower that I have now is a group of friends who know me and trust me, who will not hesitate to call me out on that. And when that happens, I don't dig in and be like, screw you, like, I know what I'm doing. I've done this before. I'm successful, blah, blah, blah. I stop. I'm like, hold on a second. It comes back to that humility, respect, and trust that Ben and I talk about a lot in our book. We talk about a lot day to day. Those are the three fundamental pillars that, from my perspective, all interpersonal conflict comes from. And so having that humility and the respect for someone else and the trust that they have my best interests at heart is what helps me to continue to improving. It's a journey. It's not a destination. We're not done.
Fitz, Ben, welcome to the show. Glad to have you.
Thanks.
Great to be here. Hi.
What's up, guys?
So we normally start with a question that we ask everybody, but we got to hear about this story about the 20-sided die during calls that Fitz, you have to start the show with.
So I've run this small invitational young conference for 13 years now. It's called Ord Camp here in Chicago, named after the airport because why not? We've had a problem over the years as we've grown. As the conference has become more diverse, we've had a problem with white dudes still don't know to shut the hell up. And so I asked two different people, one person 3 years, I guess, and then one person last year to get up and try to give a little talk about this. And I asked this guy, Dan Shapiro, who I absolutely love and adore, to get up and give this very hard 5-minute chat. I didn't tell him what to do. I just told him what the goal was. And he gave this brilliant talk, and he said, before you speak in a group of people, he said, I want you to roll a magical, imaginary 20-sided die in your head. And if, and only if, it comes up a natural 20, do you open your mouth? And that's just a way of just sort of realizing how often you're speaking and how much space you're taking up in the room. And then he had sent a TaskRabbit off to some poor store and had them fish through this massive aquarium full of dice for an hour to come up with several hundred 20-sided dice. And they gave one to everyone in the conference. And I still carry it around in my pocket with me every day as a reminder, just stop and listen.
Well, that is a good tie-in straight to the first question, which I was actually going to put to Ben, but now that, you're rolling here, Fitz. Your tip to navigating difficult conversations was shut up and listen. Why is that your tip?
That's a lesson I learned the hard way. I think I learned, Ben and I have talked a lot about this. I think I learned most things the hard way. I definitely, sure, tell me that stove's hot. I just got to know. I just got to know how hot it is. And I think for most of my younger career, I just would keep talking like I'm doing right now. But especially
you were, in fairness, asked directly.
You were asked. You were invited to speak.
Hey, Ben, can you answer that for me?
That would be an odd interview.
How do I? Sorry. What was the exact question about difficult conversations? Is that what you said?
Yeah, I was kidding. Instead of Fitz rambling, him just saying, "Hey, Ben, can you answer that for me?" Instead,
I love it.
Yeah.
I just talked nonstop when I was younger and had a lot of anxiety. And I would talk just out of nervousness, but I wouldn't learn anything. And I just learned to start listening to people, and I started learning a lot about other people's viewpoints, other people's trials and tribulations, things that I just didn't encounter because I'm playing life on easy mode. And so listening, I think, is the key.
Fitz, there's a new feature, I think, is it in Google Hangouts or something, where it actually tells you what percentage of the meeting you've been talking. It's pretty awesome.
Really?
Yeah.
That would be really, really interesting. It would be even better to have sentiment analysis added to that to see how much you're actually talking about yourself or something meaningful to the conversation.
Ow.
But
did what you say relate to what was said prior?
And like the corporate world. So Ben, you said find common ground. Actually, you just said common ground because it was rapid fire and you were beholden to the true sentiment of the exercise, which I appreciate. In a difficult conversation, how do you aim to find common ground? What does that look like?
My association there was thinking about that book, Crucial Conversations, which is pretty famous at this point, and I think it's full of compassion, right? And so they talk in that book. I mean, I don't know how much you've talked about this on the show before, but right. But the thesis of the book is that crucial conversation is basically any times you're having it's a particular kind of hard conversation. It's when there's two people arguing, having a hard conversation, but basically the stakes are very high and the emotions are very high. And when you have both those things at the same time, it's very dangerous, right? And so it talks about strategies for navigating those kinds of conversations. And the main first strategy is finding common ground, which really just sort of relies on mutual empathy, right? Figuring out where do you intersect? What are you both trying to achieve? How much of that overlaps, right? And that requires compassion and empathy. And that's a starting point, right? And it's very compatible with Fitz's advice of just shut up and listen, right? Because you can't have that empathy if you don't listen.
Right. I mean, I should argument that with saying you need to hear what the other person is saying. Because Ben, you and I had a talk with a certain engineer you may remember who was having a really hard time, and we pulled him into Blues Brothers that day, the conference room name, and
Yep.
we said, look, you don't have to necessarily do things that other people say. It doesn't mean someone tells you their opinion. It doesn't mean you have to do that. But just you have to let them know that you've heard it, and you have to acknowledge that you have thought about it and considered it. And 90% of the time, that's going to be enough for most people. People just want to be heard.
Yeah. One of the biggest piece of advice that I think we've heard in this is through our differences, we find our commonalities, right? And I think that speaks to that listen first mentality of hear what the other person is saying and just accept that it's different than yours. And in that, you give them an opportunity to hear what you're saying. And through that, you will find that commonality, which allows you to move forward. Because if you're just constantly resisting at that difference because you're trying to just be heard, like that's 90% of it. Like just hear what I'm saying. And if you're not, then I'm just going to escalate. And all I anchor on is just understand me, would you? And then you get nowhere.
That's a life hack. Like if you speaking to someone, regardless of what it is, and that you notice that they're repeating themselves, try using active listening to repeat it back to them and say, look, what I hear you saying is this, and try to put it in your own words. That because usually it just means they don't think you're listening or hearing them, and they're just going to keep repeating themselves all day long. I would people just want to be heard.
You just headed me off at the pass, but I was going to go into, but what happens when it's broken down, or it's that heated moment where you're activated and you're in an amygdala response, you're in a fight or flight response, and you're just like, I need you to hear me because I'm pissed. Or how do you get, what do you use to get to listening, or what do you use to get to common ground in those hot moments?
Breathing. Self-check your physiological response, right? Because I find it often gets in the way. Right.
Yeah. If I'm in that case, I need to take a break. Usually, I'll call what my therapist would call a halt. If you're hungry, angry, lonely, or tired, call a halt and pick it up later.
Hungry, angry, lonely. I love that.
On the halt, I love that. And often I want to halt, but there are times where something is being required of me from either another party or a thing that is happening in front of me right now, and I can't. Or at least I feel like I can't. And maybe that's the thing. Maybe I feel like I can't step away. But how do you actually practically apply halt? Or how do you apply it?
That's a hard one. If you feel like you can't, I don't know that there's an easy solution to that, because that usually means that you're not in a position where you're aware of of the feelings that you're having. That's usually how I am, and I ride that horse and tends to end poorly. I think that's where meditation comes in as a helpful thing. It gives you a little bit of extra space in that response time, and you can sort of slow down and focus on your breathing while the other person's talking. The deep breathing that we did at the beginning of this chat was brilliant. Like, I was all frazzled because my mic's busted, and like that just centered me, brought me right back.
Ben, I see you thinking.
Any thoughts?
Yeah, it's hard if you're in a conversation where there's mutual trust or respect. You should be able to see when somebody needs to halt, right, for a moment, even just to regain composture, right? That's not always the case, right? I have a teenager who, if we get in an argument and I try to back out because I need to calm down for a minute, they won't let me, right? They don't get it. And I'm trying to teach them, like, no, you got to read people. You cannot hold people hostage in an argument. You got to, like, not if you want to resolve it, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's almost exactly the scenario I had in my head. Not necessarily a teenager, I don't have a teenager, but that moment when somebody's like, no, but I need this right now from you, and like, you can't leave this. I'm not, even if it's like, hey, I just need a second, like, let me think about it. And they're like, no, I need it now. It gets really, I guess that's the external version. Because I also feel what you're saying, Fitz, in the moments where I'm not all the way checked in to the fact that I'm all the way activated. Like, I've jumped into go mode.
It speaks volumes to like just the culture of production that we've been in for, 150 years, right? Like, this increased need to do now, always in our always in our sympathetic nervous system. We're always activated. So then we're in a conversation and we are so trained. I was thinking about this relative to a colleague of ours the other day who's trying to help Rodney balance all of the things that he's doing. And he sent him a text and he goes, I'm just sitting at the beach right now, just thinking about ways that I can help you. And my immediate response is, what do you mean sitting, right? Like, just thinking? What is that? And we don't do that enough. So then we're in these moments of connection where a halt makes sense. And we're like, no, now. Even though if we waited a day, the world will not end. Your world, like, as long as we leave it saying, I love you, just in case, right? Like, if it's something that matters with somebody. But yeah, I love it. I think I love when I hear people say that, because it's such an undervalued, I don't even want to say tactic, but approach to managing relationships. Like, you get so in that space of, I need to be right now. I'm going to take a break. I'm not, and I'm not going to take that break, but I should. Halt. Hungry, angry, lonely, tired. It's a really good guideline.
I'm thinking of a life hack similar to this about prioritizing your to-do list at work, right? Fitz knows what I'm going to talk about, but Fitz and I we've been through a million different systems. Like, how do you prioritize your work? What's your to-do list? You do bullet journaling and all this other. And, I've come down to a system where my to-do list every day or every week, I just make 2 columns. One is urgent and the other is important, right? And you've probably heard this before.
The 4 quadrants, just make it
the 4 quadrants, right. And I teach this to other people too, but following through on that means not just doing the urgent. I mean, sometimes I'll be like, all right, for the next 2 hours, I'm going to do urgent stuff, right? But then I will, on my calendar, I will say, I'm going to put an hour here to do the important stuff that's not urgent. And you create that space where now I'm just going to think about what's the right strategy for my team for the next 3 months, right? Like, because you won't do that if you don't schedule time for it, right? And most people don't do that, right? But that, to me, that's like sitting on the beach thinking about it's important. Yeah. It's not urgent, but sure is important.
Yeah,
building the vision.
Is.
Well,
right?
And Keith, you just said it's undervalued. I don't think it's undervalued. I think if you ask 10 people, 9 of them would say taking a break is a good idea. I think that's the hijack. That's what's taken away from most of us. Right. For me, specifically,
when we're activated, we are not prepared for that. Yeah,
that's what the psychological terrorists take. Question: have either of you read Find Time?
No.
It's written by the Google engineers who made the Gmail app, and he essentially, another guest recommended it to me, and basically he had a moment where he was building something with his daughter, and he checked his phone to see if he got an email, and there was nothing. It was like that ghost vibration or that ghost notification. He was just like expecting that he should have an email, and he was like, what am I doing? And he threw his phone across the room. He ended up deleting the app that he made, and like all the apps from his phone that had notifications for like a month or 2 months. And he said it changed his life. And he's like, I made the app and I designed it to keep you in it. Like, I want you to be in the app and using the app. And so it talks about like understanding the notifications, the things that are pulling us. And yeah, it was a really good book for me.
I don't allow any notifications on my phone except SMS and phone calls. That's it. Same. I turn off every people look at me like I'm crazy. I'm like, what do you mean?
How do you live?
How do you live? Don't you want to get a vibration on every Facebook update, every email? I'm like, no, it would vibrate constantly.
It's like if you're ever in a group text and it's just rapid fire and you want to take your phone and burn it. That would be like that all the time. Like that would be all the time.
Well, because like too much noise means nothing. Like it means there's no notification if there's one every second.
Yeah,
I go back and forth. Like after I read the book, I turned them all off, and then like I started playing with turning some on. It's like I like this one, I don't like this one.
Yeah,
but I love that like people listening to this right now, or like he does what? No,
it didn't seem that strange to me, but I think I'm in the minority.
For who? Oh, totally. No, 100%.
No, people would absolutely freak out about turning off notifications. I had a conversation about it the other day. Somebody was like, he doesn't have his notifications.
I spent half my life without notifications. I was okay. I'm still okay.
Going back
was
home,
accomplished before the iPhone.
Getting excited that there might be a voice, that voicemail blinking light on the landline at home. Like, there's something to be excited about, and that's when you pull in the driveway. It's like, I wonder if anybody got me some mail today. When was the last time you thought, I wonder if I got mail today?
I mean, even with the notifications off, right? There's still the addiction, right? Like I'll be sitting, thinking, daydreaming of self. I'm bored. Let me check everything that would notify me, right?
Yeah.
The addiction's still there.
It doesn't cure the...
Oh, totally. Yeah.
I mean, they're designed that way.
And you have all your notifications off too, Fitz?
Same as Ben, SMS and phone. Years ago when I was on call, the tone for my text message just would freak me out. Like it would just send like a shiver up my spine every time it went off, regardless of who it was. And I tried different tones. I'm like, I'll try this little Zen like bowl tone. After a month and a half, that would set me off. Like and basically, I realized that any sound could freak me out. So I finally switched to keep my phone on vibrate. And I haven't had audible notifications on my phone in probably 4 or 5
so it was actually the sound. It wasn't the fact that you were potentially being called to go do a thing.
The sound was the vibration I'm not super keen on, but it's generally fairly low. Especially the phone's in my pocket. Sometimes I won't even feel it or notice it if I'm like, walking around or something like that.
And I like you can do vibration patterns now. That's not different for different people or different.
Yeah.
I'm the same way on that, Fitz. Like I only turn on sound if it's an emergency situation and I'm not going to have my phone on me. Otherwise, I'll turn it on and I'll forget to turn it off and that sound just starts happening. Or we're recording and I record on a Mac. And so I've got the text messages that I can't seem to understand because I don't use a Mac, how to stop them from coming in. And that noise is in my ear while we're talking. And I just want to burn my entire desk. Like that's that noise every time. But hey, let's take a pivot. Listen, you said it here. White dudes don't know to shut the hell up at the conference. And you are two middle-aged men who care about organizational culture, diversity, and building teams of equity and inclusion, which in today's day and age, you don't see a lot of middle-aged white men leading a charge, especially in a big tech company, right? Most of that is due to what we could call fragility. It's like, I don't want to do it, all of that stuff. But it matters because, white men are still the biggest population within technology, and they need to hear it from people who look like them because that's just the way our brains work. What is it that has first gotten you interested in it and just confident and comfortable to lead the charge and do it?
I don't know if we're comfortable. It's a moral imperative.
That's a good answer.
It's not comfortable. That's okay. I mean, it's a moral imperative because it's not anyone's job but the dominant group to fix it, right? It's not the underrepresented person's problem to fix.
But it always falls on them anyway. They're the ones that wind up being, left to speak up in a meeting or point something out or something like that. And I think we've both got a lot of friends who we've seen playing in that role, and they're just fucking exhausted. They're just tired of it, and they would rather see other people help out. But it's not like they came to us and said, "Hey, we want you to do this." It was just they were. I think it just came from us being present and listening and hearing what these people were saying, and that they were having a different experience than we were. When I was a younger engineer, I certainly did a whole bunch of dumb stuff. I assumed that the mode that I played the game on was the mode that everyone played the game on. I assumed that I had it nice and easy. I got to become a software engineer without a degree. Well, why? Everyone could do that. When I look back and look at the string of things that had to happen for me to get where I am without that degree, because I was playing on easy mode. And so from my perspective, I think it's just sort of like, it seems like, I think that's like a tenet of feminism. It's like making the world a better place for everyone. It's not necessarily one particular person or group. It's equal so that everyone has the same opportunities or doesn't have to fight all this crap to like just get from point A to point B every day.
How about for you, Ben?
Yeah, I mean, it's a similar story, right? I've played my life in easy mode, but it isn't until you get older and get into positions of power that you have the vantage point to see that privilege. And at the same time that you finally can see that, because you see those behind you not having the privilege, at the same time, you are also more in a position of power from anyone else to change that, right? So that's why I say there's a moral obligation as well, right? Is how do you fix it? And that's just basic, humanism.
And I still screw up. I still screw up all the time. Like, I make mistakes. I say the wrong thing. I do the wrong thing. I miss something quite obvious. But the superpower that I have now is a group of friends who know me and trust me, who will not hesitate to call me out on that. And when that happens, I don't dig in and be like, screw you, like, I know what I'm doing. I've done this before. I'm successful, blah, blah, blah. I stop. I'm like, hold on a second. It comes back to that humility, respect, and trust that Ben and I talk about a lot in our book. We talk about a lot day to day. Those are the three fundamental pillars that, from my perspective, all interpersonal conflict comes from. And so having that humility and the respect for someone else and the trust that they have my best interests at heart is what helps me to continue to improving. It's a journey. It's not a destination. I'm not done. I'm not like finished on this by any.
Oh yeah, and you've been on it for a while. And I'm curious, this last year, and like COVID, George Floyd happens in almost the middle of the first round of the pandemic. For me, Black dude in corporate America, like, I see some, I'm not gonna say, I could say shifts or conversations that I would have never expected to have in a workspace. And that's a lot. I would say like 90% fallen off since then or so.
I'd probably say, just from it's maybe 95% fallen off.
Yeah, maybe I'm being generous, but even in that, like, there was progress for sure. But I'm curious, like, what did you see in this period? So you've cared about culture, you've cared about teams, you've cared about communication, you've cared about equity, seeing people that have it harder. What have you made any observations of the period that we're coming through, still going through?
I mean, I'll jump in. The first one I saw is like, gosh, like, some people just flexibility and empathy. Like it's just, you just got to go pick it up from Costco in the bucket load, you know? Like I had someone I worked with who was just, in a meeting and they were apologizing because, their kid barmed in the room. And I'm like, pandemic time, like, doesn't matter. And then they apologized they didn't get back to you for 2 hours for something else because they had to deal with getting their kid through Zoom school. And I'm like, look, I get it. Like, if you need to take time off in the middle of the day to handle life, which is happening around you right now, and come back to do your work when you have a minute later, or if you need a time for yourself or whatever, not like, I understand that. Like, it's just understanding that working with somebody or working a job isn't this 9 to 5 necessarily thing anymore. It's like you're generally things are demanding your time all the time. But in that same note, if people are going to set boundaries and that kind of thing, some of those boundaries mean that you have to deal with stuff as it comes up, especially when you have kids in the house or pets or whatever, not that kind of thing. I don't know, Ben, you've got 3 kids in the house running around for the last year and change,
I mean, at Google, they set up some really nice structure to make it possible to accommodate people in a crisis, right? Where they basically said, look, if you need to work fewer hours because your kids are at home or you're caring for someone who's sick or whatever, right? The policy was basically like, hey, managers, be accommodating, right? Like that was basically the policy, right? And it was very flexible and very awesome. The trick was partially getting managers to be more empathetic, right? But then also what I found was a lot of, like what Fitz is saying, there's a lot of people who were almost embarrassed to ask for help, right? Or to admit that they were in a situation that required accommodation, right? It was like a point of pride. And then now you've got to teach managers to be like, no, it's okay. Like, we're not expecting full productivity from you, or whatever, right? Or like giving people permission, right? Because they're embarrassed or something. I'm not sure, or afraid.
Embarrassed or personally, I would say just would feel like there's not even room for me to add another potential question mark. Like, I'm already the black dude on the team, or I'm already the black dude, and I'm like one of 5 in the org. So if it looks like I'm slacking, like people already think like he's probably lazy. So I'm like, I don't really want to ask for extra space, but I need it. That is real. That's really
and
real.
How do you recognize that if they're not saying it, right? That's
right.
That's a
right.
leadership
and then it becomes this decaying loop, because and then when I talk to my boss about it, he's like, yeah, you got to let me know. Like, then I can block, I can tackle, I can help you, but I can't if I don't know. But then I think that the linchpin is trust right there.
And that's something that like a manager has to earn over and over and over again. And this is one thing I learned, that and most managers will say something like that. Many of them don't mean it. And people are used to that. They're used to being trapped. They're used to being tricked. They're used to being deceived. And so, when I was at Google, we had an engineer join us from Motorola. Ben remembers this person. And like on their second day, they're like, I'm so sorry. I have an appointment at 4:45. I have to leave at 4:45, and like, I'll make it up. I'll get here early tomorrow.
It was like his first week on the job, right? Or something like that. Yeah.
I was like, I don't really care when you're at your desk. You know the work you have to get done. The team knows the work that you have to get done. Just focus on the work. It doesn't matter if you come in at 8, 9, 10, or 11. If you're there when people need you. And he worked for me like 5 years before I left Google. And maybe around year 4 was when he started to, I think, believe me in some of those things, because he saw enough examples. It's really hard. People come from toxic environments.
Yeah.
It's really a note about this world of like, we're focusing on the wrong shit. Like, who cares if Danny's getting a haircut in the middle of the day? He's up until like 12 doing work. Like, I had the same thing when I started at Microsoft. I was the day before, Sunday night. I remember this. I was like, turned to my wife. I said, Rach, I don't know when I'm supposed to be at work tomorrow. Like, that never came up in like the pre-hire. I don't know when to show up. And so I texted my boss. I'm like, what? Like, is it 9 to 5, 8:30? Like, when am I supposed to be there? He's like, I live in Seattle. You live in LA. What's the traffic like? Like, what do you have to do? Do you have to drop your kids off? Like, do you have a breakfast thing with your wife? Like, this is a get the job. He's like, you'll see people log out around 1:30 because they got to go get their kids. And then some might log back in before dinner, or they'll log in after the kids go to bed. Like, whatever. It's not really about when you clock in and clock out, but I'm just so used to being micromanaged to the point it's like, if you're at your desk, that's the only time you're actually working because I can see you here.
It's such an example of the importance of culture, but even that added point that you put, Fitz, managers have to earn the trust over. Like, the culture eventually forms itself such that, but it takes a long time and it takes a lot of buy-in in order for people to come in and feel like, oh, this is okay behavior. It's that example of, okay, we have these programs, cool, but what if I take advantage of that program, right? Well, you do that one time, then the next time these programs come up and you want to take advantage of them because the company says it's okay, but the culture doesn't. And the culture then organizations are like, why aren't people taking advantage of these things? It's because you got a bunch of bad managers, or a bunch of people aren't fostering the culture that we want to decide. Yeah.
Flip side, some managers do mean it, but the culture also doesn't allow it. Like,
correct. Yeah.
Just because your manager's like, oh, it's cool, but you can see who's getting promoted, or you can see who's making it to high levels. That'll tell you whether or not it's actually acceptable in some cases.
Yeah. And I used to walk around talking, Ben and I we used to give a talk. We tell people, like, if you're really not happy, find a way to leave your job. And we had one question at the end really confront us on that. Like, I can't leave my job. Like, I can't just pick up and go. Like, I have a family, I've got to provide and that sort of thing. And that helped us, I think, to refine that, to start actively looking for a job if you're in a place where you can't make the change that you need to and you're unhappy. Because, there's a lot of privilege to being able to step away or to be able to take that risk. And I was really lucky. Like, at Google, like, I used to work on, I used to say, do the right thing and wait to get fired. And that was, Ben will confirm, like, I did a lot of pretty out there stuff at Google, and I managed to not get fired. But it was what I thought was the right thing. But I knew that I had the cushion if I got fired.
I mean, that right there, like, you catching, because I was just about to ask you about the privilege in that, and I'm like, but you were making that note and adjusting to it in your talks. That's you.
That's learning.
Yes,
it's growing, right? Yeah. Growth mindset. That's how you combat fragility, is with growth mindset.
Okay, we're gonna pause it right there. We're gonna come back at this in just a little bit of time. Have a great rest of your day, evening, weekend, week, whatever it is. Have a great one.